The sound of the shofar, usually blown better than that. You'll hear a better example in a bit. It's the most recognizable sound of the high holiday season, only perhaps following a sigh of satisfaction after eating a slice of my mom's honey cake, or your mom's honey cake, as the case may be. The sound of the shofar echoes across the Bible. It was heard at Mount Sinai during the giving of the Ten Commandments. It was sounded by the Israelites in the desert to tell them when to move. It was sounded by Joshua at the walls of Jericho and during the coronation of King Solomon. All of these such pivotal moments in the lives of those who heard it. As we know today, the holiday of Rosh Hashanah is especially tied to the sound of the shofar. Rosh Hashanah, which literally means the head of the year, is actually a relatively modern name for the holiday, or as modern as the Second Temple period can be. In the Torah, Rosh Hashanah is referred to simply as Yom Tru'ah, the day of the blasts. The sounding of shofar is the central element of the holiday, according to the Torah. It's the part of the holiday that we cannot do without. It's not enough that we blow shofar 100 times throughout the day. It also holds a central place in our liturgy. In the Unatana Tokef prayer during Musaf, the prayer that Cantor Hordes will chant so beautifully in just a few minutes, we will hear Uve Shofar Gadol Yitaka. The great shofar will sound. This great shofar, the shofar Gadol, is an allusion to that biblical shofar, the shofar that was sounded at Mount Sinai, the sound that announces the divine presence. But before we get to the Unatana Tokef, we will blow the shofar, and before that we will say the blessing, Asher Kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lishmoa kol shofar, praising God who sanctified us through commandments and commanded us to hear the sound of the shofar. This is the biblical mitzvah, the biblical commandment according to the rabbis for Rosh Hashanah. Technically, you could stay through the blowing of the shofar and then leave and you would have a check mark next to your name. Don't do that. I'm not encouraging it, but you could. There's something about hearing this sound that makes this day special. Lishmoa kol shofar. The blessing is for the hearing of shofar. It's meant to have a deep effect on us as Jews at this time of year. But what is it about these sounds that are so impactful? What is it about the shofar that makes it the most important aspect of the holiday? Why all this hullabaloo about a ram's horn? We're given many reasons throughout various rabbinic writings as to why we listen to and blow the shofar this time of year. We sound the shofar as a celebration, as a warning call, as a reminder to slow down, as encouragement to speed up, as an aid to feel God's presence. There are no shortages of explanations for the sounding of this horn. The great medieval scholar Rambam Maimonides wrote in the Mishnah Torah in his Compendium of Jewish Law, in the section Hilchot Tshuva, the section dealing with the laws of repentance, that the piercing sound of the shofar is meant to wake us up. Uru yeshenim mishnetechem, wake up, sleepers, from your sleep, and slumberers, arise from your slumber, search in your ways, and return in tshuva. For Maimonides, the shofar is meant to help us remember what we are here to do in case we were dozing off during the rabbi's sermon. I hope it worked just now. It's a call that reminds us that we are here to dedicate ourselves to tshuva, to returning, to repenting, to becoming better versions of ourselves. Shvarim, the three shorter blasts. Shvarim literally means pieces or fragments. It comes from the Hebrew root lishbor, which means to break apart. While it may have served as a second wake-up call for you, this particular cry of the shofar can also trigger feelings of brokenness, of falling apart. In the biblical period of the book of Judges, the Israelites followed Joshua into the land of Israel, but they struggled to establish themselves in the land. There was this Canaanite general named Sisera who especially tormented the Jewish people. Sisera commanded 900 chariots and oppressed especially the tribes of Zebulun and Naphtali for 20 years. But then we learn that Sisera faces the prophet Deborah and her commander Balak in battle. When God helps Deborah and Balak prevail, Sisera flees on foot until he arrives at the home of Yael, a woman who lived nearby. In a shocking moment, really, a shocking moment, instead of hiding the general, Yael encourages him to wrap himself up in a blanket and then kills him by driving a tent peg through his head. It's a moment immortalized in a number of Renaissance paintings. Next time you're in Europe and walking around, you'll see this painting. While this is definitely a moment of girl power for both Yael and Deborah, in Deborah's song that commemorates the battle, she lingers on the image of Sisera's mother, waiting for him to come home from the war. We learn from the Tosafists, a collection of French and German commentators, that the shofar sounds of shvarim, these broken sounds, are connected linguistically and spiritually to the groans and wailings of the mother of Sisera. It's a shocking turn there. Sisera was a brutal despot whose death literally brought about freedom for our own people and ushered in a long period of peace. But nevertheless, we are reminded every year by these shofar blasts to listen to the cries of those who have experienced loss, to be compassionate towards those who have been left widowed or childless by war's destruction, regardless of who their loved ones were or on which side they fought. According to this interpretation, the cry, the groaning of a grieving mother is literally in our ears every year on Rosh Hashanah. The cry of grieving mothers, fathers, sons, and daughters has been on my mind over the past few weeks as I've watched the terrible news that's come out of Afghanistan. As the Taliban swiftly took control of the country, there were many talking heads who were quick to opine on what this meant politically or geopolitically, what it meant for the region or what it meant for America. But that's not what captured my attention. I could not tear my eyes away from a video that made the rounds on social media that was incredibly difficult to watch. In this video, a plane is seen taking off from Kabul airport, and the people were so desperate to leave that they clung onto the landing gear until the plane took off and they fell from it as the plane ascended into the sky. I could not stop reading accounts from women who had been empowered over the last 20 years and who are now facing the return of a regime that sees them as less than fully human. I want to go out. I want to drive. I like driving, Fahima Saban said in an interview, but because of this situation, I cannot. I'm afraid. Fahima, a 29-year-old high school teacher and mother of two, said she and her husband never applied to immigrate to the United States. They both had solid jobs and believed in Afghanistan's future. An anonymous Kabul resident said in an interview that she had nearly completed 2 simultaneous degrees from 2 of the best universities in Afghanistan. She should have been graduating in November from American University and Kabul University. But this morning, she said, everything flashed before my eyes. I worked for so many days and nights to become the person I am today. And today, when I reached home, the first thing my sister and I did was hide our IDs, diplomas, and certificates. It was devastating. She said that now it looks like I have to burn everything I've achieved in the past 24 years of my life.
You need to mute yourself. Your picture keeps flashing up.
Truah, the biblically inspired blasts, the staccato notes that feel shattered, piercing. They sometimes seem as though they are broken beyond repair. Another anonymous Afghan woman interviewed by the podcast The Daily said that to the world, it's just a city that collapses. But to me, it's not just a city. The woman who is only identified as R said there are thousands of souls that collapse. There are millions of dreams that collapse. Our history, our culture, our art, our beauty, our lives collapse. But I'm not here to start my tenure as Rabbi of Knesset Israel with an all doom and gloom Rosh Hashanah sermon. We do not end the blowing of the shofar with the sound of shvarim, with brokenness, nor with the sound of truah. We do not end with the sobbing and staccato cry, but we always bookend with another tkiyah, a proud, clear blast of the shofar, just like the one with which we began. Hopefully I'll blow it better than the first one. This is our pattern. We start with the Tekiah and we come back to Tekiah. The 20th century mystic and religious Zionist rabbi known as Harav Kook explained this pattern of shofar blasts. He said, Tekiah, the world was created complete. Hayom harat olam. Today the world was created. But then shvarim, human beings and natural forces, have broken and shattered the world. Truah, sometimes it seems broken beyond repair. But Tekiah, with God's help, we can rebuild it again and make it whole. Malala Yousafzai said in an op-ed in the New York Times, we will have time to debate what went wrong in Afghanistan. But in this critical moment, we must listen to the voices of Afghan women and girls. We cannot continue to fail them. We have no time to spare. We will hear their cries of shvarim and truah, or will we turn away? In these moments, I'm reminded of the rebranding that the Hebrew Immigrant Aid Society, HIAS, did just a few years ago. They said, we used to take refugees because they, the refugees, were Jewish. Now we take them because we are Jewish. In the same Unatana Tokef prayer that speaks about the shofar gadol, the great shofar, we chant at the end, Utshuva, Utfila, Utstaka, Ma'avirin et roa hagzera. Tshuva, repentance, tefillah, prayer, and staka, working to make the world a more just place through our funds and through our actions. Those three things are what impacts God's view of us as people. As one of my mentors, Rabbi Eitan Hammerman, said in his Rosh Hashanah sermon 5 years ago, if tzedakah can save us from death, shouldn't our tzedakah also be able to save others from the same fate? I believe that in this situation, it is not enough to not turn away. It's not enough to watch the videos, to read the stories, to feel bad. There must be something that we can do to bring the world a little bit closer to Tekiah. A week and a half ago, I had the honor of speaking with Maha Kolto, herself a refugee from Syria. Maha has a PhD in linguistics and had to flee Syria when the Assad regime accused her of spying for America after she attended an academic conference right here in Louisville. Not knowing where else to turn, she found herself back here, without a home, without family, and without job prospects. Through the help of the community, she now works for Kentucky Refugee Ministries, helping other families to see what she found, that you can build a new life here in Louisville. It might not always be easy, she told me, but this community makes it possible. We do not know when refugee families will begin arriving. The State Department has announced that we will be getting hundreds of refugee families from Afghanistan here in Louisville. They're currently processing thousands of special immigrant visa applications for Afghans who worked with Americans or who are particularly at risk of being targeted by the Taliban. They and their families could arrive in a few weeks. It could be a month or two, or it could be tomorrow. This is why Knesset Israel Congregation is beginning the process of co-sponsoring a refugee family through KRM, through Kentucky Refugee Ministry. I believe this commitment is one that is vital right now. It is one that will be meaningful for our synagogue and will be deeply impactful for the family that we help. Co-sponsoring a family is more than just putting up some money to help a family reach America. As a co-sponsoring organization, we will show our support for the new refugee family in a variety of ways, including but not limited to gathering household goods and furniture to prepare for their arrival. We will join KRM at the airport to welcome the new family. We will serve as guides and advocates and friends to the family as they settle in and adjust to living into the United States. We will assist with transportation and caretaking as we're able. And perhaps most importantly, we will learn about and honor this family's cultural background as we get to share our own. I'm pleased to share that KIP, Knesset Israel Preschool, has already offered to help in any way they can with childcare for the family. We're so thankful to Sherry and for her whole team for being excited about this possibility. I told Maha that Knesset Israel would be ready to help this new family whenever they arrived, that we've heard the wails of mothers from the Shvarim, and that we are ready to rebuild the world with our Tekiah. When Rosh Hashanah ends, please send me an email, rabbi@knessetisrael.com. Give me a phone call or simply drop by the synagogue to speak if you would like to be a part of our team that helps to care for for this family. Let us resolve today, on the holiest day of our calendar, to be God's partner in restoring faith to those who have been through unimaginable trauma. There are so many people in the world who are in the middle of a period of shvarim, of breaking apart. There are far too many who are in a moment of truah, of feeling broken beyond repair. May we be able to do some small part to help repair, to alleviate, to unburden those for whom their world is collapsing. May we dedicate ourselves to realizing what we can do to bring the world and its inhabitants back to Tkiah, back to wholeness, to shlemut. Then a great peace will embrace the whole world, true shalom. May we enter into this new year committed to making it one in which God's creatures can taste the sweetness of life and feel the wholeness of Tkiah. L'shana tova u'metuka. May we have a sweet and healthy new year.
What if it was all real? Seriously, what if everything that we've been talking about for the last month, for the last 2 days, everything we've been praying about, the things that we talk about year after year on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, what if it was all real? Now, I'm not necessarily saying what if God was an old man with a long white beard up in the sky, but what if there really was a heavenly court, a book of life and a book of death, a true accounting for our actions every year? I've been reading a book over the last month and a half or so that I read every year this time of year, and it's called This Is Real, and You Are Completely Unprepared. This book challenges me each and every year to lean into this idea of perhaps a tangible reality to the things that we speak and pray about. What if these 10 days that we're about to enter, these days before Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, were truly the great test, were really the great gauntlet? One of my favorite TV shows of the past few years has been The Good Place. It's a sitcom that centers around moral philosophy and the question of what makes one a good person. In other words, it's a rabbi's dream show. In the show, you would end up in either the good place or the bad place after you die, and where you would go would be determined by this labyrinth of accountants who were tallying up each thing you did during your life and weighing just how much good or how much bad it brought into the world. Help an older person across the street? Plus a few points. Leave a really low tip for a waiter who was just trying to do their job? Minus a few. Genocide? Minus a lot. You know, it balances out between the small and big good things. But the point is, in Judaism, we don't have a concrete example of a good place or a bad place, but we do have a lot of imagery found in our liturgy and in our holy texts that tell us that God is examining us this time of year. God is deciding who shall live and who shall die, who by water and who by fire. What if there really was some cosmic point system, a tallying that would determine our fate in the coming year? In the Talmud, the rabbis speak of a scale that we're supposed to look at that is perfectly balanced between our good deeds and our bad deeds, knowing that one extra mitzvah, one extra good deed could tip it in one direction, and one aveirah could tip it in the other. Now, for me, and likely for many of you, this is a stretch. For some of you, it might be a really big stretch. We're not conditioned to believe in things that we can't see, that we can't feel, that we can't prove through reasoning and logic. So here's a better question. What if we acted as though it was all real? What if we went against every instinct that's been ingrained in us since we found out that chocolate milk doesn't really come from brown cows, or that your eyes don't really get stuck if you cross them, or any of those other things that our parents or older siblings or silly older friends told us that we found out that they weren't true? What if we said, who cares whether it's real or fake? Who cares whether there's actually a court of angels watching, or that God passes us under his watchful staff like a shepherd watching sheep? Sometimes we choose to believe in a story, and we choose to tell that story because we believe that there's value in the story itself, whether or not it is real. How many of you were tricked by the tooth fairy when you were a kid? if there are any kids watching, tricked is just a figure of speech. How many of you still believe that the tooth fairy is real? How many of you either passed on the story of the tooth fairy to your children or to other children or your own if and when, or plan to if and when you have kids? Now I want to be clear, lahavdil, let's make a separation. I'm not making a direct comparison between God and the tooth fairy. I would like to imagine God is a little bit more generous than my tooth fairy was. But my point is that regardless of your personal beliefs about God and about what these 10 days might mean metaphysically, if we buy into them, they can absolutely mean something real and valuable to each of us personally. Theologian Paul Rincourt calls this second naivete. For Rincourt, first naivete, that first stage of our life, often when we are children, is when we believe that everything in the Bible is real as written, that there were talking donkeys, that there were splitting seas, that all of these things truly happened. And then we arrive at the desert of criticism. And this is not just congregants telling you what they think about your sermons or what people leave in comment boxes at your place of work. The desert of criticism is when we say, maybe it's not real. And if it's not real, then it doesn't matter. If the history of this thing doesn't hold up, if I can't confirm that every single thing that happened as written, then why should I care? And it is only beyond the desert of criticism, says Rincourt, that we wish to be called again. It is we wish to be called again. We wish to enter again into a state of naivete, a state of believing. It's an acceptance that regardless of what our rational brain tells us about historicity and proof and scientific theories, that the stories, prayers, and traditions that we hold dear can still be deep fonts of wisdom, and they can help us lead better, happier, and more productive lives. So what might happen if we took this bait? What if we decided together as a community that we were going to spend these next 9 days as though our lives were in the balance? We spend so much of our lives cloaked in cynicism. I do. Probably many of you do as well. Trying to figure out what's real, what's fake news, who we can trust, and who must be shut out. What would happen if we drew back our shields and opened ourselves up to the vulnerability of connection with each other and with the divine? In his writing on the laws of tshuva, on the laws of repentance, Maimonides splits sins into two categories. Ben adam lechavero, between a person and other people, and ben adam lemakom, and between a person and God. If you committed one of these former sins, if you wronged another person, you're not getting any closer to forgiveness here in the synagogue, or there on Zoom, or on the live stream, no matter how hard you may beat your chest, or no matter how hard you pray. According to Maimonides, God does not even listen to the repentance of someone who has harmed another person unless you've tried to make it up to them. So if we're opening ourselves up to the assumption that this is real, that the stakes are life and death, we probably should reach out to that friend, that coworker, that classmate, even that random person who we may have hurt in the past year. One of my Rosh Hashanah resolutions a couple of years ago was to have some of these difficult conversations that I was afraid of. I reached out to multiple people who I had previously hurt through words or actions, and I said I was sorry. There was one person in particular, a classmate who I was supposed to help organize a program at school, and I had totally dropped the ball. I was supposed to invite people and help promote, and I had been overwhelmed with other work and not held up my side of the bargain. As a result, the program was lackluster, attendance was low, and all of the work that my classmate had done to make it so wonderful felt wasted. We didn't necessarily have a fight over what happened, but it definitely strained our relationship, and we were not as close as we had been. Reaching out to admit that I was wrong, that I had dropped the ball, was incredibly difficult. Apologizing is scary. Those who are here and know me well know that admitting that I'm wrong is one of my least favorite activities in the world. But if it meant being sealed in the book of life, it's probably worth it. As a bonus, it helped repair a relationship that otherwise might not have been the same. And what about that second category, ben adam lemakom? What if we lean into the realness of this experience? What responsibilities do we have vis-a-vis God, vis-a-vis the divine? This is the time that is good, coming into synagogue to work on that relationship, says Rambam in the Mishnah Torah. These sins between Adam lemakom, between a person and God, includes things like not keeping Shabbat, not eating kosher food, or breaking other Jewish laws that might not impact any other person. Now, this is not the part of the sermon where I harangue you for not keeping Shabbat, or I tell you have to keep kosher for all of next year. But perhaps thinking about why you do or do not do some of those things might be the first step toward building a deeper relationship with God. Maybe simply asking the question opens the door. Thinking about what might that conversation look like. How can I, a rabbi or a professor, a doctor, an accountant, a former mayor, a partner, a single person, a lover of music and art, however I define myself when I come before God, what does it mean to try to deepen that connection? We read in the Torah portion just last week, Nitzavim lo b'shamayim hi. The Torah is not in the sky, nor is it across an ocean, nor is it across a sea that you should say someone else has to go get it for us. This isn't about changing your life drastically right now. That's not what this time is necessarily supposed to be. It's about what is accessible to you. What are the small things that you can start to do? This is not the only time of year in which we can commit to being better people. But it is a time when we focus on it. It is a time when we focus on what can we start now that will carry on through the rest of the year and the rest of our lives. So what would it look like to take this on? To treat these days as if they were real? To understand that we are completely unprepared. We might really devote a significant amount of the next 9 days to a personal accounting of ourselves. We might come out of these next 10 days mending relationships, fixing problems that we've been putting off. We might reach out to apologize to other people. We might even reach out to appreciate the divine. This journey, however, is not without its dangers. If we leaned into this all being real, everything that we read, everything that we understand to be true, theologically that could be really difficult. It would mean really deeply questioning how we relate to God when we see bad things happen to good people in the world. If we're leaning into this all being real, if we have all of this imagery in our high holidays of God being the true God of justice, we might question what that justice looks like. We might stop and think and look around us and really deeply question. And personally, it can be hard to take that deep, hard look at yourself and think about what it would be like to come before God in judgment. No matter who we are, no matter how much tshuva we think we might have done, we would be completely and utterly unprepared to really have that experience. But even with those drawbacks, even with our unpreparedness, I think it's worth it. I invite you into this second naivete with me. I'll be here over the next 10 days, and I'd love for you to join me on this journey, this traveling from the courtroom into the world and back again on Yom Kippur, to take this pause. The great 20th century Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel noted that Judaism's greatest gift to the world was the creation of sacred time. The idea that not every day should be the same monotonous scene, but as we progress through the week, through the year, and through our lives, there are times to laugh, times to cry, times to dance, times to sit, times to gather together, and times to spend in solitude. Now, on the Jewish calendar, is the time to repent. Now is the time to take stock of our place in the world, of the way we treat others, and the way we treat ourselves. Now is the time to really think about what it would mean to be our best selves, to love ourselves fully, and to take the first steps toward making that best self a reality. What a shame it would be if we waste this time questioning whether or not it's all real. Shana Tova u'Metuka. May we all have a sweet and happy new year.